18 months ago, Barnaby left his corporate career with big creative ambitions, but no clear direction. If that sounds familiar to you, this video might be the one for you to watch. In this conversation, you'll hear how he went from overwhelmed and distracted to actually presenting at business recognized conferences with his own personal business perspective. We talk about backing yourself, cutting through the noise, and why an off-the-shelf solution wasn't right for him. If you're wrestling with similar challenges, creative ambition that's pulling you in multiple directions, you're struggling to focus on what really matters, then I offer a free 30-minute clarity call. There's a link on my website. It's in the description. It's not a pitch. It's not a sales call. It's just an opportunity for you and I to have a conversation about what might actually help you. Okay, right. Let's get on with it. Over to Barnaby. Hi, Barnaby. Thanks so much for jumping on this call. And for the people who are watching, do you think you could introduce yourself and give me a little bit of a setup of like how you got to this space before we were working together, and maybe even how we know each other a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Rolly, and thanks ever so much for inviting me on and having a chat. I think it's always nice to catch up with you and discuss. I think what to me has been a topic that's kind of, I suppose, been front and center for my life, really. I suppose for about the last 18 months, and I suppose where we find ourselves today is about 18 months ago. I left my corporate job and really took some time out after a career of about 15 years, and where we first met maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I think for me, my journey was one that I suppose I'd been in that corporate space and worked in many different fields, and then sort of found myself thinking, what do I want to do for the next 15, 20 years of my career? So primarily I've worked in corporate learning and development, and that's been with large organizations. Where we met at Apple, and that's also been with medium businesses and in a I suppose in a capacity of working as a contractor for, say, smaller organizations. But while I've been doing that, I've also worked in things like the film industry, where I've gone off and made content for television and film. So yeah, look, I've worked in a number of different fields, but primarily around that, I suppose, let's use that brand, that term, creativity. I think for me is what I've tried to build a career out of, is taking raw ideas. They might have been mine, they might have been someone else's, and then using my creativity and my skills to I guess provide solutions. And that's where I find myself today, where I've taking that decision to go out on my own, start a company within the learning space, which is called the Learn Foundry, which will be launching early 2026. And really, I suppose our relationship has struck back up because you found yourself in a similar situation where you left your secure, whatever that word means nowadays, job. Did a good YouTube video about that, which I'd recommend people to go and watch. And I suppose, yeah, you sometimes you find yourself at these forks in the road where it might be forced upon you, it might not be forced upon you, but you've got to make a decision. And that's where we've kind of come back in contact. You were my manager at Apple, and I always enjoyed working with you. You were someone who tended to ask the questions as opposed to giving the answers, and really, I suppose, open my mind up to that idea of thought-provoking questions that kind of led you to the answers that were individual to yourself. So that's where I am, and hopefully that's a little bit of a background of how we got to know one another.
What was your situation kind of practically and emotionally when we kind of first started working together?
Yeah, so I left my role 2024, and second child came along, and first child arrived in 2020, and that was at the height of the horrible pandemic, which we'd all like to forget. And I didn't really get to spend any time with my daughter at the time. And then when my son came along, I made the decision that I really wanted to take some time out and prioritize my family. So we went off and we went traveling, and we had an amazing time. And I think when you do that, you can only drink so many pina coladas, and sometimes you end up maybe on the beach, and you know, you can only read your book for so long, and then you start to think, and you start going, well, what do I want next, you know, 15, 20 years of my life, if I'm lucky to be around, and what do I want that to look like, and what do the priorities look like that? And I think in this ever-changing world where the traditions of 9 to 5 are probably going, the traditional way of the sort of the industrial revolution way of you turn up, you clock in, you learn a skill for life, and then you clock out sort of mentality. I could see maybe changing. I could see the world of work changing, people leaving jobs because they felt burnt out, people being made redundant because of changes in circumstances in the economy, let's say, or different technologies coming in. So I think that to me was a bit of a spark. Well, I was taking that time out of my family, and then coming back and then talking about, I suppose, going back to those traditional roles and thinking, well, you know, there's an hour commute either way. You know, most people struggle now to buy houses in cities, so we don't live and work in the same place anymore, whereas perhaps 50 years ago we did. So how does that all tie together? And the answer is I don't know. And I think that's how we started connecting back, is that sometimes I think when the brain is sort of set free and wild, it does that. And what the relationship we managed to strike back up was you being very public in offering this service of really saying, like, you're not the only one out there whose creative thoughts and whatnot can spiral. How can you channel that? And we, I suppose, had some very open questions and some very open conversations, to which you, like I say, led some very open questions to. And I really remember those initial conversations being, well, what do you want to do? And it's like, oh, well, this week I want to start a learning and development company. Well, this week I want to start a motorcycle, you know, touring company. And really kind of getting into the granular of, well, you know, what are you good at? What's going to be a hobby? And where do you think you can make an income, or where do you think you can make a living? And I think if I think back to those early days of us having a conversation, it was quite honest, I suppose, quantifying from yourself, which then led to, I suppose, quantifying conversations from the people around me who are important, and that's my partner and my family and friends, and saying, yeah, okay, that's an idea, I like that, but you might not be able to make a living out of that. Is that a good idea? And if it is, then how can you sort of quantify that in your mind? So I think for me, it wasn't necessarily sitting in with you and having a sort of a deep and meaningful every time where, you know, you sort of, it was about those going back to what you were great at when you were my manager at Apple, which was, how do you ask the right questions for me? And I think that was great that we had that relationship, to which strangely we just seemed to pick back up on, which was awesome. And I think, you know, if you reflect, if most people look at the great relationships in their lives, you know, I think of my best friend from when I went to school. You know, we talk once a year, but when we do talk, it's you know, it feels like we've spoken yesterday. And I think that's where we kind of got to, because I think what was very clear from the beginning was the conversation was authentic, and you can't buy that, you can't fake it, and that made it very easy to have those conversations.
Thanks. What do you think? So that's a little bit of how I did help and dive in. But do you, like, when you kind of reached out to me, I think you'd found my starter kit, but what was the actual problem that you were trying to get some help with?
One thing everybody probably goes through in modern society and the modern world is flushing out the noise. And the starter kit that you created was brilliant, because it gave tools to enable me to control the noise that was coming in. I appreciate that we can't just go off, and we can do. You could go and live in the middle of nowhere and not be part of society, but the very nature of how the world is now is that we do have to be connected via devices that we're using today, for example, and that has a massive positive. The fact that you're in Ireland and I'm in Melbourne, means that we can have this conversation via technology, which is absolutely fantastic. But what the starter kit enabled me to do was control what noise I would let in and what noise I could live without. So I think one thing that was really pivotal to me on our initial conversations is that you were very open and honest about how screen time had affected you, and how you'd got your screen time pop up every Monday morning that said you spent X amount of time looking at your phone, and realized there was no value from that. And that was the initial thing that I looked at, going, my goodness, and it's amazing that we have all this information, but what value is it adding to my day, and what value is it adding to what I want to do in the long term? So that was step one, was how do I stop all these multiple plates spinning? And I think spinning's quite optimistic, probably falling down. But then how do I really hone in my focus to say, okay, I don't actually really need that. Yes, it's got a purpose. I like to go on Instagram and I like to see what my friends have been up to, and, whatever, but I don't need it all the time. I don't need that hit all the time. A bit like I don't need to be surrounded by people all the time. And I think what that starter kit really showed me is that the technology is with us all the time, and it's effectively as a pipe. I'm sitting here in Melbourne, and actually I can access the world, but that's in my space. So it was about controlling that and saying, okay, well, I'm only going to interact with that at certain times. So one thing, the practical solution that you gave me, was going through the Ikigai chart, which was the idea of, what are you good at? What do you think you can make money out of, basically, or where do you think you can earn an income, and really what defines a hobby and whatnot. And not just going with that, but actually then going back with you and not just having a chin wag for, half an hour and coming off the call going, I don't know, we talked. There was that practical breakdown of, okay, right, we've discussed this, and we've discussed this. So I could see, progression after 3 or 4 sessions where it felt like the noise was in everywhere. It felt like the ideas were flowing, and it felt like I was starting all these things. But actually it was like, well, why don't you just try and tackle 1 or 2 things?
Yeah, it was like we went into discovery, and things got wide and broad, and
Stop.
Everything was on the table for a while, and then it was just a matter of actually taking that, and how do we filter that down into something that's, rather than having every possible option out there, which we talked about a lot of options, but then it was a matter of kind of really honing it down into what's landing for you and what could be useful for you. Is that right?
Oh, I think I've dropped out. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Good. Sorry. Yeah, I think you're dead right. Is, for me, I think this is part of the noise, and this is really important to define, is our distractions are taken all the time. We start one thing and then something comes in, and we see it in everyday life. Is, we see you'll be talking to someone and then a phone goes, and then, and I'm still culprit to this, and I have to look at myself and go, right, okay, stop looking at the phone, you're having a conversation. So, and I, I'm a 36-year-old man. I'm having to sometimes retrain myself on basic etiquette of, if I'm talking to someone, then I need to. So if we look at the granular of what we were talking about in those initial conversations, it was really the basics. It was actually going back and going, okay, I like to think of myself as this person, and I like to think that I'm someone who holds a conversation, but actually, geez, my screen time suggesting that I spend X amount of time on my phone. How can I physically can't fit those many hours in the day? So I must be compromising multiple things. So I think before I could progress with any of my ambition, I kind of had to get we call them the fundies here, the fundamentals sorted. Because otherwise it would have just been built, quite frankly, on a bloody mess. Now, there's always going to be some chaos, and I get that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part I love.
Mm-hmm.
But what we both learned working together was, if you get those basics sorted at an individual level, the foundations are strong, So if you can shut out the noise, you can understand what your thought process is, you can understand what your strengths, your weaknesses are. That's actually a really good place to start.
I'm not sure if this is related, and it might be, but like, why did you choose to work with me? Because there's like an infinite supply of books, podcasts, like YouTube videos out there that could help you dig into this and focus. Why is working with me the choice that you made?
Because I'm me, and like everybody else in the world, we're individuals. Now, I think that books and podcasts and whatnot are absolutely fabulous, and I listen to them as much as the next person. I try and read, and I listen to a copious amount of audiobooks. But unfortunately, they can't talk to me as an individual. You can. You can ask those questions, and like a good journalist doesn't sit there when he or she is interviewing someone and have they probably have points that they want to get through, but actually what a smart journalist will do is they will see where the conversation is going. They'll know when to prod a little bit further, they'll know when to pull back. They have that I suppose that timbre of the conversations. They know when to go higher, they need to go lower, faster, whatever. And I think in a world now which content, solutions, ideas can be pumped out as fast as it ever has been, and the broader spectrum of an off-the-shelf solution is there for everything. That more bespoke, that more individual approach was really important to me when initially deciding to, I suppose, reach out to yourself, because I knew that is what I was getting, with someone who would talk to me and not be reading from a script or going, oh well, actually, I've seen this, or I've had this conversation before with someone, so I'm just going to pull that off the shelf and here's your solution. I didn't want that.
So to dig into that a little bit more, like, what's one thing that kind of you and I have worked on that's helped you to move your kind of your aspirations and your business forwards? Like, one thing that you can think of, oh, it was that conversation, that chat with Barnaby helped me go from A to B.
Yeah, and it's one thing that sticks in my mind, actually. It's one thing you said to me once, which was, you need to back yourself into a corner. Now, that's quite a harsh statement. It wasn't like it wasn't like I was in a street fight or anything. We got to a stage of our conversation where I think my business was trying to be everything to everybody. And actually what you said is, look, that's great, but you're not moving forward from the position that you're in. You're going to keep in this very noisy space. At one day you could be doing this, one day you're going to be doing this, one day you're going to be this. You're not actually seeing the confidence. You're not understanding your ability, and you need to have a bit more confidence to be a little bit more brash and a bit more confident, to actually be very vocal about the services that you can offer. And those services have value. So back yourself and make bold statements. If you believe in them, then speak up about them. And that was really important. And I think a lot of people who are incredibly talented in their particular field are not necessarily great, let's say, salespeople. They are not great at sometimes backing themselves and saying, and it's all this kind of, I suppose, idea, oh, it's not quite good enough, it's not quite good enough. But actually, it is. And actually, it's iterations. It's not going to be that Hail Mary swing that you kind of go out on the golf course once and you go, right, well, I'm just going to whack this golf ball and I'm going to hope for hell. And, you might get a hole in one. That might happen. It's probably going to be pure luck. But actually, it's about saying, okay, I'm really good at this. Now I need to build the confidence to go out there and effectively tell the world about it. And that was a real practical solution that you gave me, which I know sounds very simple, but no one else had ever said that to me, is start backing yourself a little bit more. Like, what's going to make you stand out in what your services are and what your company's going to offer compared to everybody else? Because you've got to have a value. There's a reason as to why you want to be doing this. What is that? And you need to be able to articulate that, and sometimes be very bold about that. And that to me was a real fantastic piece of advice, a skill that I hadn't necessarily thought of. Is I thought perhaps I had to be quite pleasing and didn't have the confidence to maybe turn around at times and go, you know what, that's not me. But so over there can do that amazingly well.
And what's been the upshot of you diving into that and actually kind of being brave and having an opinion in, you know, in your space and even in your city?
Well, a good example of that was I'm really fortunate enough to be asked to speak at conferences and with fellow peers about my industry and where I feel it's going and you know what it's all about. And I really believe that what learning can do in businesses can transform them, and I believe they can add a real value, whereas I don't necessarily sometimes feel that my industry understands that. Is, you know, we've got to be able to articulate it to, you know, the CEO and the HR manager just as much as we need to, you know, articulate it to the accountant. So what that meant is it tightened up my narrative, and the next talk I did at an L&D conference in Melbourne was, well, it was called valuable learning, and it was about the idea of how we go into organizations and how we actually articulate to everybody as to what our value is. And of course in organizations there's many different people, so it's not a, you know, one fit suits all scenario, whereas I don't think I necessarily would have done that before I'd been on this journey, because I think I would have sort of almost been too polite about it. Whereas what that did and what it enabled me to do was go out and say, look, this is how we need to start looking at this industry, and I'm going to be an absolute advocate for this, and I'm going to probably be someone at the forefront of this, going, no, we need to move away from this idea that, you know, learning in organizations is this arty-farty lovely thing, and, you know, we're all gonna, you know, sit around and sing Kumbaya because learning's a lovely thing to do. No. We need to add to businesses. We need to add to the value of a business, and businesses need to make money for us all to be employed and stay in that. So how do we start to quantify that? And you need to start quantifying that, because these are the questions that are coming over the hill. And if you're not prepared, I can show you 1,000 examples of people who are not doing this right. So what that enabled me to do was say, right, okay, I'm very confident about this now, and this is what I'm going to, and I'm happy to be challenged on it as well.
So Barnaby, what's different for you today than where we were 6 months ago in terms of like your day to day, in terms of like how you're building your business and kind of where you're heading with it?
I think the first thing which is massively different is I'm starting to understand where the peaks and flow of my day are. And I'm just being totally honest with myself, is I'm someone who likes to work in the morning. I think I do my best work in the morning, so I'm prioritizing my work in the morning. And then, you know, perhaps in the afternoon, if some of those jobs, you know, around the house or, you know, in the office have come up, those are the times that I do it. And I'm quite honest with myself and saying, right, I'm not really adding value here. I need to go and do something else for an hour and a bit, you know. And then it might mean that, you know, I'll jump on tonight, for example, and I know that I'm having a catch up with Rolly, so, you know, I'll free up some time to do something on the motorcycle, for example, this afternoon while the weather's good. So it's actually trying to step out of that mindset of working in a sort of in a corporate industrial revolution mindset, where it's like, whatever I'm feeling, I'm just going to bloody struggle from 9 till 5. You simply can't do that as someone who operates and runs their own business, because you might be working with someone in Europe and, you know, we're 11 hours ahead, so actually I can't jump on at midday. So it's about ebbing and flowing a little bit with regards to what my time looks like, and prioritizing as well. Is I also know that like many things on, you know, your devices and phones, is I just don't have those distractions there anymore. I don't have social media on my phone. And it's not for everybody, I understand that. I'm not advocating for that. What I'm saying is I don't trust myself not to just get into doom scrolling or sit on YouTube and go down rabbit holes. So my days and my practical solution around me is that I create a nice studio to come and sit in, that I want to come and work in. I have a device that is really is giving me value, and when I do then jump onto, you know, things that perhaps are those distracting things. It's a controlled environment, and I'm not sort of trying to live this Buddhist life where I'm saying, well, I'm not going to use social media, I'm not going to do that. Like, I do use it, I love it, it's amazing, but it's controlled. And I jump on and I go, right, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes, because I think if we all looked at ourselves on using our tech, we're probably a bit too much on the phones, and we're probably too engaged with it, because it's bloody fantastic. It's designed to capture you and draw you in, and that's what it's designed. That's great. I'm not criticizing it, but I need to understand where my limits are with it. We live down the coast, for example, so it's about factoring in things like, well, I want to go for a swim, and I want to go out surfing, or I want to go running. So what are the important things that make me and make me function as a decent human being in society? So it's about, first of all, it's about being honest with yourself and going, okay, I'm not really doing much at the moment. I'm sort of farting around, and I need to actually just go and do something else. And then it's about understanding, well, I'm going on a journey now where I'm building out a business. What's stopping me from listening to the noise? And I'll refer back to your video that you've posted out recently about, get a job. How do you the next phase now is how do you not get drawn back into that? Because you know what you're doing, the path you're on possibly is the right path for you. So how do you, that can change, but while you're on the path that you feel and know is right, how do you avoid that noise? And for me, what these calls have been really good at is, whoa, you've gone off, and I think that's great, and I love that, and I love the kind of the foraging out in the in the woods. Oh, that's a great idea. It's really good to talk to someone and just go, well, okay, well, that's great, I love that, but is that what you want to do? Or are you just kind of caught up in the excitement of it all, and are you just feeling like that's a new shiny toy? And that's been a really beneficial process to go through with someone like yourself, who's highly experienced, doesn't do it in a way where it's not sort of like boot camp where it's like, come on, get on with it, don't get distracted. It's like, okay, so why did you do that? And understanding that, and understanding that sometimes it's really awesome to sit on YouTube and go down a rabbit hole for half an hour, because the stuff you find out is brilliant, and that's fine, but create space for that. But be honest with yourself, be totally honest with yourself, and just enjoy that, because we can't all just be plugging in and working all the time. Whereas I'm sure if I read a book, it would say, right, you've got to do this and this and this and this. That's great work for them, and I can take advice from it, and you can pick and choose, which is awesome. I love that. So I think for me, the structure of my day has been massively important, and it's about understanding that it's not just me in my household either. I'm trying to set this up, but I have a young family. I have a beautiful dog behind me who needs walking, or running at least twice a day. So it's unfortunately the off-the-shelf solution of the way of work isn't applicable anymore. It's just not how the world works.
Like when we started working, this wasn't necessarily about you starting a business and kind of moving in that direction. It was really about that, the idea of like, how do you reclaim your space? Like, because life, like you said, with like 2 kids, a partner, and a dog, it's even that's really distracting, aside from what the pipe is pushing in your direction, but also like we're both marathon runners as well, so like this has actually turned into a bit more of a marathon than I thought either of us expected, because you're still not at the finish line. You're still building. You've been through many iterations of what you think your business idea is and what the business model is, so I can tell us a little bit about like kind of how your thinking has changed over the past couple of months in terms of like how you're building out your business, because you've, like, as far as I'm aware, you've had loads of conversations with clients and kind of pitched ideas, and but how's that evolved your thinking about what you're going to do?
Well, I think you're dead right, and I don't think it ever has I think ultimately it's an ultra marathon, this, and it's not just one. It's this idea of life to me, and what I've come to realize over the last 18 months is it's this evolution of change, which you think we're kind of brought up thinking, well, if you go and do this, you go and do this, and you tick this right box, then this is how your life is going to be. I never thought growing up in Somerset that I was going to end up living in Geelong. Now, where I'm going to be in 10 years' time, I've got no idea, but quite frankly, I don't care. You know, wherever I go will be an adventure, I hope.
But south of France, if you've got anything to do with it, right?
Yeah, it'd be lovely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll
100%.
see you. I'll see you there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, indeed. I think the question you ask is massively important in the world that we live in today, in that I've just done a promotional video for our business, and it's all about it's about us. And the premise is that, you know, that the footage starts off in, you know, sort of, you know, factory work in the 1950s and 60s, and the idea is that, you know, you clocked in, you clocked out, and that was that. I think it's moving at such a pace now, is that if you're not evolving with what, and this is not to do with my specific industry, this is any industry, if you're not evolving with it, and that's not being on Instagram or YouTube and seeing what people are trying to sell you, that's really understanding it. You know, it's understanding the fundamentals. And if you're not doing that, then actually it could get past you, and it's going to get past you quicker. This isn't going to be a slow dying death of the car industry that took 20 years and it just gradually faded out. You know, this will change a lot faster. So how's that worked for me? What that has meant is this idea of a set product or a set service probably doesn't exist. Is you have to listen to what your customers want, and you have to listen to their problems. The great thing is, with all this sort of turmoil and what's going on in the world, is there's lots of problems, and that's an opportunity for me. And I can listen and hear, and you go, right, okay, I think I've got the fundamentals. And this is what we go back to the earlier conversation. If you have the fundamentals in place, actually the detail tends to be the easier thing to sort out. You know, the cake starts off with the, you know, mostly the same ingredients. It's the finessing at the end that defines it as what the cake is. And I see this process very much like that. Get your house in order, get your fundamental way of working, and understand what your principles are and what your core is, and to what your passions are. Then you start to finesse. And that's what I've really learned in the last kind of, I suppose, 6 months of going in, pitching, some of them being bloody awful and going, oh my God, I really balls that up. And some being great and going, okay, right, I've really nailed this. But actually not going in thinking I know all the answers here, and actually really listening. And then coming back and analyzing, where is the detail in this? Where's the common pinch points of my industry? And I do it all the time now. I get through these bloody notepads. You know, I need to get a sponsorship deal with someone, and I'm not, again, this is people going, you use a notepad, are you, a pen? How old-fashioned are you? You know, but that for me is, I'm just copious at writing notes, and I'm copious at, and I'll sometimes spend an evening in front of the TV, and I'll just be sat there and I'll go through it. All right, there's a point, and it's drilling it down and seeing where those common problems are, to which then I can say, okay, I think that's where my service fits, because I'm seeing a common trend. And that to me is where our conversations have been incredibly helpful, because you've been not an echo chamber, but a supporting voice in, yep, that's a great process, because you that's tried and tested. You're not getting distracted by other things, and you're asking the right questions to potentially your clients, and those are the people that are important if you want this to be successful.
You were recently in Europe, and not what was that, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago now, but you were home to visit your family. You went to visit some friends, but you actually made a distinct effort to fly into Dublin and come and see me. Like,
yeah,
you know, why did you come to see me? Because we hadn't seen each other in 10 years. I used to be your manager. Why would you drop into Dublin to come and see me? Like, what can't you get on a video call that you wanted to come and experience seeing me in person? Like, obviously there's Guinness, and we went to 40 foot for a swim, but what else were you thinking?
Well, the swim was great, you know, and the Guinness was even better, you know, and that to me is just, it was a fabulous time. And I really enjoyed spending, I think, you know, just over 24 hours. And look, my thoughts are this, is after COVID, I think the world forgot how to socialize in person, and probably started to really underrate the value of human connection. That's a problem, I believe, because, like I said, this is fabulous. We're 18,000 miles away from one another and we're having a live conversation. Brilliant. But there's nothing like, and we just happen to like Guinness, and we happen to like swimming, we happen to like running, right? So nothing to do with that. It's not about, it's actually sitting down and having a conversation with someone who is incredibly knowledgeable about what they do, is passionate about what they do. And sometimes you can't get that over the screen. You can't see the dynamic changes in people's faces, their reactions, respond to the moment of a question or a response. And this is great. This is probably the next best thing, I think. But actually, it's not a one channel fits all. This works. And then if you're in Australia, you'll pop and see me, I hope. And if I'm back in Europe, I'd love to come back and spend time with Rolly and the family. For me, it's just really important that we are able to maintain relationships. I think it's really important, and I try and do it with all my friends and colleagues and people I've met over the years. I've got a really fantastic friend named Christoph, who's an ultra distance cyclist. He lives in Belgium. Every year, every time I go back, I'm get on the Eurostar, I go cycling, and me and Christoph cycle for a couple of days. I just think it's you've got to make the effort. You've really got to make the effort, and and I suppose I don't know why it's important to me, because you're right. I FaceTime my parents every week. We live 18,000 miles away. I'm not going to write to them and do things like that. But I don't know. I just really value human connection. It's lovely just to turn your phones off and just not get the same stuff that everybody else is. Again, I think maybe it goes back to that point of what I was saying earlier, is like, I can't bottle you up and sting you around the world and say, right, here's everybody's dose of Rolly, because that's just not how it works. Like, you have to put, I think the more you kind of respect a friendship, or the more you can get out of it, and it becomes much more personable. I don't want everyone to know. I don't want to go on. I think, like, I don't want to give that away to people. I want it to be mine. I want to be slightly selfish about it, if that's okay. And I want the same for everybody else. I want people to have their own experiences, which is to them, and not. That trip was interesting because there was a part of me that after I went down. Well, I saw a friend in France, which was lovely, and she is totally off the phone. She's off the grid massively, and it's a bit too extreme for me. But it's a different way of how to do things, and I get that. But I was in restaurants, and it was beautiful. It was the Côte d'Azur in August, beautiful weather. Everybody was looking. Everybody was a model. It was just. But I saw people out to dinner, couples, and sitting there, and I was just out to dinner by myself. I had a book, and I'm there, and people are sat on their phones and not talking to each other. And I just thought, why, and they were then taking pictures. And we had it in Melbourne the other week. Me and my partner went out for dinner the other week, and I watched this couple sit opposite one another. They didn't talk to each other. And then they both handed each other their phones. They took pictures, and then they just went back to looking. And it's not the phone's fault. It's not that. I'm not complaining about that at all. What I am saying is it's these. You have to invest in these things. If you don't invest in yourself, and you don't invest in people, I think people probably invest more in their car than they do themselves, if I'm being quite honest. So a car can be taken away from you at any moment if you miss the finance or you prang it. Like, the great thing about investing in you and relationships is no one can take it away from you. You don't. Very hard to unlearn something. You can adapt it.
Yeah, and you may have just answered my next question, which was, if somebody's watching this and thinking, I don't know if I really need this, like, what would you tell them?
Well, I don't know either. That's the point, isn't it? I think that's the point, is that there isn't this kind of. I think I keep harping on about it because it's so important. Is like, we can get the fundamentals right. We can go. Everybody can go and read and listen and get different opinions. That's amazing. But what I think is really important is how do you filter out the noise as to what matters to you as an individual? I don't know whether people will find this beneficial. I don't know. I simply don't know. But I think for the sake of jumping on a call, if they can catch up with you in person, however that looks, why not? Because, like I said, why would you settle for a one-size-fits-all solution to something that can't be taken away from you? We don't settle for that. You don't settle for that in your home. You try to be an individual, and you do things that are individual in your life. Your Instagram feed is not the same as everybody else's because we are individuals. We have our own individual way of working. So while all the off-shelf stuff is absolutely invaluable, coupled with or paired or whatever with a service like yours, means that you're probably going to be supercharging that. And you're then going to be kind of honing into what works for you as an individual, which, why wouldn't you want that if you're in this space where you need a little bit of focus and to wipe out the noise? For me, it's just been it's been amazing to reconnect with yourself, but to have focused conversations, to then look back as to where I think I was, say 6-8 months ago, my focus levels have just been like honed in. And I've read all the books, so I've got them all up there. They never did that for me, but what they have done is they've sparked conversation, and it's been that kind of it's been that addition. So I think
the book doesn't WhatsApp you saying, "Hey, when are we next jumping on a call?" Right?
100%. Yeah. I should have mentioned that. You are very good on the WhatsApps. You're very good at checking in and actually holding. And maybe this is the manager in you that came out, and you're very good at jumping. Right, when do we catch up next? Come on, what's going on, sort of thing. And I think it's that accountability part, isn't it? We all need that in different ways. And sometimes, I'm a pressure player. I like that pressure. I like, right, okay, you need it done. Come on, let's get on with it. And that's where my best work comes in. So, and that's worked for me. But again, that might not necessarily work for other individuals listening to this. I think it's, like I said, it's part of an overarching or overall way of working, which has worked for me. It might not for you, but that's absolutely fine, and that's part of it, And I would recommend I'm a big advocate for investing in you and your capabilities. And now you might be someone who is or was a really good musician or just wants to create an album. Like, who gives a shit whether that goes and outsells Dua Lipa? Like, what an awesome thing to do, and just have that as like an achievement. And sometimes it's really hard. And I remember us having this conversation before. Is like, I think people who have a creative mindset tend to have an idea of what their final product will look like and are almost scared that they'll never achieve it. And I think working with someone like yourself is this idea of its iterations. It's always iterate. And I honestly don't think that it doesn't matter whether you are the best musician in the world or the best actor in the world. I think everybody had that. I remember listening to, in a long lost interview with the famous actor in the 70s, Peter Sellers, who was, the comic genius at the time. I couldn't watch himself. Thought he was rubbish. And I think, well, he was the funniest guy in the world, and he couldn't watch himself. So if the top people are having this problem, then what chance have the rest of us got? And they have people who could tell them that they could do it, actually, and their levels of expectations were just different. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I suppose there's a part of me that thinks that by chatting to someone like yourself, you're really good at saying, okay, you're not going to hit that holy one straight away, but actually let's get you to a par 5 or whatever. I'm using golf. I didn't play fucking golf, so I know what I'm talking
Nor
about.
do I.
Yeah.
So I've got a final question for you, Barnaby. What one thing that you wish you'd known 6 months ago?
back yourself in cutting out the noise and back yourself in what you're good at. Wish I'd known.
And you think knowing that earlier would have accelerated things for you?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. Hey, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And I hope you get to surfing soon. Do you want to share where people can find you and follow along your journey of how your company's coming along?
Sure. I'm pretty easy to find at the moment. If you just go to Paco, which is PAKO creative.com, that's my individual website, and then there'll be links and whatnot on there for all future endeavors. So yeah, head over to pacocreative.com.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time to share part of our journey together, and appreciate you. Thanks, Barnaby.
Pleasure, Rolly. Always a pleasure.
And if you've watched this far in the video, thank you so much. Please hit the subscribe button. It really makes a difference and it gives me a real buzz. I'd love to get over 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. That would be amazing. But YouTube will suggest another video of mine here. Go take a look at that. Find out a bit more about what it is I do, how I help creatives. And if you're interested in finding out more, like I said at the start, there's a link in the description. Book yourself in a 30-minute call and we can chat about how I can help you to make progress. And even if we never end up working together, I do think it's worth us having a call and a chat. And you maybe find somebody else to work with, but that's absolutely cool with me. Anyway, until next time, stay creative.